During that particular January, my perspective on winters changed drastically. My marriage had hit a rough patch, and this unforgiving cold seemed to mirror the cracks in our relationship. Despite our efforts to mend it, January tested our resilience like never before. Our winters are always harsh, but this one was different. For 2 long weeks, the sky remained overcast, with barely any snow accumulating. However, mid-month, a significant storm was forecast, and everyone, including us, prepared for a major snowstorm. Linda and I had planned a date for the 15th, but as the snow continued to fall, work was canceled, and the city shut down. Instead of venturing out, we stayed home, clad in cozy clothes, while our children gleefully anticipated a snow day. After they drifted off to sleep, I handed Linda a glass of wine. "I'm sorry, Linda," I said. "This isn't how I wanted this night to be." "It's okay, Jim," she replied. "It was fun looking forward to it. Plus, I got a new dress you haven't seen yet." "You know the rule," she teased with a smile. "No peeking until we go out." I glanced at her, remembering her effortless style. She had a knack for making her own clothes when she couldn't find what she wanted, and she had even created many of our daughter Emma's dress-up outfits. Linda always had a way of standing out without being flashy. I gazed at the diamond on her finger. "Thank you for saying yes, Linda. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered softly. We sat in a comfortable silence. After a moment, I apologized again. "I've been on edge lately. It's not your fault." "I know, Jim," she said. "I've been feeling the same. Maybe it's this gloomy winter." She chuckled. "But we have each other and the kids, and that's enough." Our first date at Wendy's had become an inside joke between us. Back in college, I had been broke, but Linda didn't care about fancy dates. She just wanted to spend time together. We still grabbed Wendy's every now and then for old time's sake. That weekend, the storm delivered 2 feet of snow, shutting everything down. The kids were ecstatic, relishing the opportunity to miss school, watch movies, eat pizza, and play in the snow. Linda and I enjoyed it too, cherishing the time we had together as a family. The only downside was the kids' insistence on watching Frozen repeatedly, and Linda still wouldn't show me her new dress, teasing that I had to take her out in it. The real world returned on Sunday evening when the plows cleared the streets, with school and work resuming on Monday. But the weekend left us with a warm, lasting memory. One evening, Linda received a call from her close friend Dee. She hung up excitedly and shared a plan to end the miserable month with a night out. Dinner, dancing, and a hotel stay with friends. It sounded perfect. "There's just one condition," I said, looking into her eyes. "You have to wear that dress I haven't seen yet." "With pleasure," she whispered, her smile promising a night I wouldn't forget. The dress was blue, though I couldn't pinpoint the exact shade. Whatever it was, it made her blue eyes glow. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and a skirt that fell below her knees. Yet it was far from conservative. The skirt swirled as she walked, and when she danced, it moved in a way that demanded attention. The fabric hugged her curves perfectly, accentuating her slim, feminine figure. As Linda descended the stairs, I was speechless. She smiled and gently closed my open mouth with her finger. "It's still just me," she said softly. At dinner, our group of 10 enjoyed a lively evening. Linda was the most stunning woman there, and I made sure she knew it. I touched her arm or hand every chance I got, and she reciprocated with warm smiles. After checking into our rooms, we headed to the club. Linda whispered to me, "We don't have to stay too long, do we?" I could tell she was eager to get back to the room, and I was just as excited. At the club, Linda attracted a lot of attention, but her eyes were only for me. When Dave asked her to dance, she politely declined, saying she wanted the night to be special for us. Later in the evening, Dante Romano, a well-known football player, showed up creating a buzz. To my surprise, he approached Linda and asked her to dance. I watched as she accepted, and they danced 2 slow songs together. The sight of her melting into his arms unsettled me. After they returned to the table, I asked Linda if it was time to leave. For a brief moment, I saw fear in her eyes. She quickly excused herself, saying she needed to go to the restroom. Dee went with her, but only Dee returned. When Linda didn't come back after several minutes, I asked the bartender to check on her. He interrupted, saying, "She's not in the restroom. She's left the club." I scanned the bar and then down the hall toward the restrooms. Realizing the situation, I rushed outside, just in time to see a large man and a dark-haired woman leaving the parking lot in a Honda sedan. They were definitely not Dante and Linda. At that moment, I heard a powerful engine start up. I turned to see a black Corvette speeding away. Instinctively, I reached for my car keys but realized I'd left them inside. I pulled out my phone and called Linda. The first call rang until voicemail picked up. When I tried again, it went straight to voicemail. She had turned off her phone. Frustrated, I headed back inside and ran into Dee, who had been looking for me. "Dee, what's going on?" I demanded. "Jim, Linda's gone. She's with Dante tonight," Dee said. His words hit me like a punch in the gut. My mind raced with images of Linda in her dress at dinner and at the club. Anger flared up within me. So she left me for some jock on our special night? "Jim, it's just tonight," Dee tried to reassure me. "She'll come home to you tomorrow." "She didn't even have the guts to tell me she snuck out," I said, my voice growing louder. People started to notice. "Calm down, Jim, it's just one night," he said. "She loves you and always will." I couldn't hold back my bitterness. "And you helped her," I accused. "You kept me distracted so she could leave." Dee admitted it. "She didn't want you to embarrass yourself. But she'll come back, and everything will be fine." "What if it's not fine? What if she can't make this right?" I shot back. "You're a good man, Jim. You'll forgive her because you know she loves you," Dee said, trying to calm me down. I shook my head, angry and disgusted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So if Dante had picked you, you'd have done the same?" I asked bitterly. Dee hesitated but didn't deny it. "No, and Dave doesn't need to know." I left Dee and went back to our table, where everyone was avoiding eye contact. They all knew what was happening. Seeing the empty seat next to mine, the reality of what Linda had done hit me hard. I grabbed my jacket and keys, choking back tears, and turned to leave. Just as I did, Dee and her husband Dave blocked my path. "What are you doing, Jim?" Dee asked. "I'm leaving. I can't stay here," I said coldly. "Come on, Jim. You two will get through this," Dave said. I glared at him. "Why shouldn't I divorce her? We agreed a long time ago, once and done." "Jim, think of your kids," Jane said, trying to intervene. "Is that what Linda's thinking about right now?" I shot back. Jane tried to reason with me. "Jim, what if a supermodel picked you tonight? Can you honestly say you wouldn't be tempted?" "Yes, I'd be tempted, but I wouldn't do it. I have a wife. At least I did until tonight," I said, looking at her coldly. Dave then chimed in, saying I was overreacting. That pushed me over the edge. I got in his face, warning him to back off, and shoved him back into his chair. The room went silent as I threw down a $20 on the table. "That covers my tab. You can cover hers too." Then, without another word, I left. I stormed out of the club, my mind spinning as I walked back to the hotel. What was supposed to be a joyful night had turned into one of the darkest moments of my life. Linda should have been beside me, holding my arm, laughing with our friends. But instead, I was alone. I took the elevator to our room, memories of happier times in similar hotel elevators flooding back. Inside, I saw the remnants of what should have been a special night. Chocolates on the pillows, and a new blue lingerie set laid out on the bed. I held the delicate fabric, imagining Linda in it. But the reality hit me hard. She wasn't coming back tonight. I broke down, realizing my wife was with someone else. After what felt like hours, I woke up in the same position, still clutching the lingerie. My mind was racing. I packed up both our things, ate the chocolates, and threw the lingerie in the trash. It was meaningless now. I checked out of the hotel and drove home, overwhelmed by pain and anger. On the drive, I realized I'd been reacting all night, waiting for Linda to stop Dante, trying to chase them down, doing nothing to take control of the situation. This wasn't me. I was always the one in charge, the one solving problems. I decided it was time to stop reacting and start acting. I turned the car around and headed back to the club. There, I asked the bartender about Dante, learning that he regularly preyed on married women. Frustrated, I was about to leave when a woman at the bar gave me a lead. Dante lived in a big gray house near Meadowbrook Park. I drove around the area until I found the house, a large mansion with a black Corvette parked out front. I approached the door and rang the bell. Dante answered in a bathrobe, clearly annoyed to see me. "I'm here for Linda," I said coldly. "She's not here," he lied, trying to shut the door. I didn't back down. "Let me talk to her or I'll call the police. We both know you don't want that kind of trouble." Reluctantly, he let Linda come to the door. She stood there in a robe, surprised to see me. "What are you doing here, Jim?" she asked. "I'm here to bring you home." "Let's leave now and we can deal with this privately," I pleaded. But Linda refused. "I'm staying the night with Dante. He'll take me home tomorrow." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I warned her that her actions would have serious consequences, but she remained indifferent. "Go home, Jim. We'll talk tomorrow," she said, dismissing me. I left, knowing things would never be the same again. She stepped back inside the mansion and slammed the door, shutting me out of her life as completely as she had closed the door. I stood there for a moment numb. Then I walked to the back of my car, opened the trunk, and calmly narrated into my phone, "I'm taking out my emergency bag and cutting the valve stems on all 4 tires of Mr. Romano's Corvette. This should cost no more than $100 to repair." After finishing, I left a $500 check under the windshield wiper and then called emergency. "There's someone vandalizing Dante Romano's car," I reported, giving the address. I wasn't done. I grabbed a lug wrench from the trunk and continued speaking into my phone. "Now I'm breaking the driver's side window. The replacement should cost less than $200. I smashed the window, setting off the alarm. Within minutes, Dante came storming out of the house, cursing and threatening me. I held up the wrench, warning him that I was prepared to defend myself. "Is it worth risking your career?" I asked. He stopped in his tracks, confused and angry. As the police arrived, I dropped the wrench and raised my hands. The officer separated us, and I admitted to causing the damage to Dante's car. To my surprise, the female officer cuffed me, whispering that she was sorry but had no choice. I asked her to note the check under the windshield. Linda stood off to the side, watching as the officer picked up the check. As I was loaded into the patrol car, I caught a glimpse of Romano tearing the check in half, a smug look on his face. At the police station, I made my one call to the local newspaper, offering them a story about Dante Romano. Then I spent the night in a holding cell, dozing off among other detainees. The next morning, I was released and greeted by my lawyer, Derek. Over coffee, I told him everything. By the time I finished, he suggested starting divorce proceedings. I agreed. Derek dropped me off at my car just in time to see Romano's Corvette being towed away. I drove home, expecting Linda to be there, but the house was empty. I showered, changed, and fell asleep on the couch. 2 hours later, I woke to the sound of the front door. "Jim, I'm home," Linda called, sounding like nothing had changed. She looked exactly the same, wearing the blue dress from the night before, as if nothing had happened. She launched into accusations, blaming me for the night's events. "Dante could have eliminated you, Jim. What were you thinking?" I replied coldly, "Are you proud of yourself, Linda? How will your parents feel when they find out?" She tried to reassure me, claiming nothing had changed between us, that her love for me was the same as ever. But I couldn't believe her. If that's true, then I guess we never had what I thought we did. Linda's face fell. She went upstairs, and when she came back down, dressed in sweats, she asked about the lingerie she had left on the bed. "I threw it in the trash," I said. "Just like you threw away our night," she replied sadly, trying to convince me she had planned to make things right. But it was too late. I asked, "Was it everything you expected?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Linda met my eyes, looking worried. "Jim, I know you have questions and I'll answer them honestly. But are you sure you want to hear it? I don't want to hurt you more. It's a bit late to worry about hurting me now, isn't it?" She winced. "I know, but telling you might make it harder for us to move forward. Can't we focus on the future instead of letting one night ruin everything?" "That's something you should have thought about last night," I replied. I pointed to a vase on the mantel. "How many times would I have to throw that for it to shatter? Even if you could put it back together, it'll never be the same, right? Jim, I love that vase, but I can live without it. I can't live without our marriage. What we've built is stronger than one mistake. I know you're hurt, but I believe you love me enough to get past this. Until last night, I thought you loved me enough not to cheat. I guess we were both wrong. Linda slumped in her chair. Was the night with him everything you expected? Dante isn't an a-hole, Jim. He's a good man. Any guy who takes a woman away from her husband to sleep with her is an a-hole, I shot back. He didn't take me from you. Then where were you last night? Okay, he took me for the night, but I'm here now, and I'll stay with you forever. So you're like a toy he played with and returned? What if the next celebrity comes along? Another night alone for me? No. I'm here because I love you, because this is our home. If he asked you to stay longer, would you still be here? Linda blushed. You're right, but he was kind and respectful. I wish you wouldn't call him that. Oh, I should thank him for treating you nicely like a free hooker. I was standing now, angry. She shrank back. I sat down, trying to calm myself. All right. Was it everything you expected? I asked again. More, she said, meeting my eyes with sympathy. I sighed. How did it start? She explained how Dante asked her to dance, and though she didn't expect it, she couldn't resist. She thought it would just be a couple of dances, but after the second dance, she felt something more. I didn't decide to do it. I just knew I would, she admitted. Her words hit me hard, but I stayed quiet as she continued. He told me to meet him by the back door. I appreciated that he didn't rub it in your face. I thought you were eager to be with me after dancing. I didn't realize you were eager to leave me, I said bitterly. I wasn't leaving you. It was just one night, like running an errand. I knew I'd come back. Running an errand, really? Sleeping with him was like going to the store? She flinched. No, but I was never leaving you. I asked if she would have stayed if I cut in. She looked me in the eye. No. Her answer cut deep. Do I mean so little to you? No, Jim, you mean the world to me. Your actions say otherwise. From the moment he approached, I meant nothing. I checked the clock. I'll get the kids, help settle them, then I'm going out. I can't deal with this right now. Jim, I didn't do this to hurt you. Please don't do anything that makes it harder for us to stay together. You already made it hard enough. Think of Emma and Tommy. You didn't think of them last night, I snapped. Before I left, I told her to write down what happened. I don't need details of what you did, but I need to know what you were thinking. I can't stand to look at you right now. I'll do whatever you ask. But how can I make it up to you if you're not here? She asked. Not until you show me a clean STD test. Linda blushed. Must you embarrass me? Dante's an athlete. He has to be clean. Did you ask him? No. I grabbed my coat and left, disgusted that she hadn't even considered the risk when I picked up the kids and they ran to me shouting, "Daddy!" and filled the car ride with excited chatter. It was loud, chaotic, and exactly what I needed. Back home, the kids repeated the same excitement with Linda while I unpacked their bags and packed my own. After supper and story time, we tucked them in. As I kissed them goodnight, I promised myself that no matter what, I would always do right by them. Later that evening, Linda approached me cautiously. Jim, are you sure you want me to write it all down? Do you really want to read it and feel the pain again later? Exhausted, I replied, I never wanted this, but you did it anyway. Obviously what I want doesn't matter to you anymore. I don't want to read it, but I need to understand what happened to make decisions going forward. She reached out to touch me, but I stepped back. Her hand dropped and her face went pale. I'll do what you asked. I'll even mark the parts that might hurt you the most, so you can skip them if you want. I nodded, picked up my bag, and said, I'll see you tomorrow. After dinner. I love you, Jim. You know I do. As I walked out, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered. Hello, this is Janet Norton from the Sentinel. Do you have a moment to talk about your incident with Dante Romano? Over the next half hour, I shared the story with her, answering her questions. By then, I had told the story enough that I could do it without feeling the crushing sadness. Janet said she'd write it up for the next day's paper and asked if she could contact me with more questions. I agreed. Afterward, I checked into a cheap hotel halfway between home and work. I grabbed a few beers at a small local bar, but barely registered anything around me. My life as I had envisioned it felt shattered. I knew I had to focus on the kids. They needed stability and a home where they could grow. That was non-negotiable. But Linda, she seemed to think everything would go back to normal once I got over it. But I knew things would never be the same. Was Linda and I over? I didn't have an answer yet, but the thought of our kids being shuffled between two homes was unbearable. We had to figure something out for their sake. The next evening, I returned home to our usual chaotic greeting from the kids. Linda greeted me with a smile, but I held out my hand. "Don't touch me until you give me what I asked for." After the kids were in bed, she handed me a stack of handwritten pages. "I spent a lot of time on this, Jim. I've tried to answer everything honestly. I know it will hurt, and I cried while writing it, but I won't lie to you." She tentatively placed the papers in my hand. "Good night, Jim. I love you. I love." She tried to kiss me, but I held up my hand, and she left. I stared at the pages, appreciating her familiar handwriting. It reminded me of the person I thought she was. I sighed and began to read. "Dear Jim, when you left, you said you didn't understand what I meant when I said I love you. I was stunned. I think you meant that if I truly loved you, I wouldn't have done what I did, and I would have agreed with you, right up until Dante came to our table. Then somehow, everything changed. I want you to know that my love for you hasn't changed, even though I know my actions hurt you deeply. I didn't cheat on you to hurt or humiliate you. I didn't do it out of revenge. I'm trying to be honest because you deserve the truth, even if it hurts." When Dante took me in his arms, I felt overwhelmed. His size and strength made me feel small and powerless. Though he never forced me, it wasn't as if I had no choices, but it felt like everything had already been decided. From that first slow dance, I knew I was his for the night, and I didn't resist. I just went along with it. Did I like that feeling at the time? Yes. Now I hate that I gave up control so easily, and to someone I knew didn't care about me. Would it have been the same with any other big, assertive man? I don't think so. You know Paul is big and strong, but I never felt anything with him like I did with Dante. It was just Dante. When I signaled Dee to take me to the restroom, she already knew what was going on. She said Dante wanted the only girl who didn't chase him and told me I was lucky. She promised to keep you distracted long enough for me to get away and reminded me to have fun. Then I went outside, and Dante was there with my coat. I don't know how he got it without the ticket. Celebrity perks, I guess. When he helped me into my coat and touched my shoulders, I felt overwhelmed, just like on the dance floor. He drove me to his house, put on soft music, and we danced in his living room. I think he wanted to show he was a gentleman by not rushing me to bed, which I appreciated. We kissed as we danced, and he was completely in control. After a while, he carried me to his bedroom and laid me on the bed. He undressed me slowly, almost reverently, and I've never been so aroused in my life. I don't know how long we had sex. It felt like forever, and it was everything I wanted. At one point, I thought about texting you to say I was safe and loved you, but I was too tired. I just fell asleep. Then I woke up to someone pounding on the door. I didn't know it was you when I saw you in the doorway. I was shocked. I hoped Dante would make you leave, but when he told me to talk to you, I didn't know what to say, so I just told you to go home. Afterward, I was sobbing, and Dante comforted me. We went back to bed, and he held me until I fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I heard the alarm go off, and Dante shouting. He somehow knew it was you. By the time I got to the door, I was terrified. I thought something terrible would happen between you two, but the police arrived before it escalated. It was humiliating to give a statement and explain who I was and why I was there. The officer judged me, Jim, and it wasn't fair. Then they arrested you, and I cried for the next 20 minutes in Dante's living room. How could something that started so beautifully go so wrong? I woke up in Dante's arms again. Even then, I felt the same pull toward him. We had sex again. Then he made me breakfast. It wasn't as good as yours, but after everything, I would have eaten anything. Then we were together one last time, and I showered after that. Something shifted. It felt like Dante had released me. I could think clearly again. I think you were right. He got what he wanted and didn't need me anymore. That's when I started thinking about you and how devastated you must feel. I knew it would be tough, but I don't believe our marriage is in danger. Our love is too strong. Dante dropped me off at home, thanked me for a wonderful time, and gave me a hug and a light kiss. It was over. As I walked through the door, I was eager to show you how much I love you and want to spend my life with you. I still feel that way. I don't think Dante meant to hurt you. He just assumed he had a right to me, but if I'd said no, he would have moved on. He treated me well, like a lady, opening doors and remembering my name. It wasn't about me. It could have been any woman. But I can't help but think well of him because of it. This part will hurt, Jim. Dante is an excellent lover, skilled from lots of practice. He knew exactly how to please me. It was the best sex I've ever had, but it wasn't with me or for me. It was on me. You'll never have his experience, and thank God for that. You've learned how to love me over time, and that's far more valuable than the greatest sex. This is the hardest part, but it gets easier from here. Dante gave me great sex, but it didn't have anything to do with me as an individual. I was just another woman to him, and that made it impersonal. One last thing. If Dante asked me to leave you and marry him, I'd say no. Even without Emma and Tommy, I would always choose you. Dante is an excellent lover, but you are an excellent man. I know you're upset. My love didn't stop me from giving Dante what was meant only for you. But now everything has been returned, and my love for you remains unchanged. Love, Linda. I felt mentally and physically drained. How could a married woman have an affair and then come back to her husband asking him not to do the same? Is this the modern idea of marriage? Commitment with no loyalty? If so, what's the point of marriage at all? Well, she played her game, and now it's her turn to face the consequences. I gathered the papers, turned off the lights, and left for my hotel. I couldn't focus at work on Monday, going through the motions until a 1 p.m. meeting with the divorce lawyer Derek had set up. I arrived at Diane Hoffman's office, unsure of what to expect. She was a no-nonsense older woman, energetic and direct. It was unsettling when she repeatedly said, "If I decide to take your case," even though I thought her representation was a given. After hearing my story, she asked, "Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" I told her everything, even showing her the recording from Romano's house. As she listened to Linda's confession and the altercation, her smile grew. "I need a copy of this recording and that confession too," she said, amazed that I had it all in writing. When she asked what I wanted out of this, I admitted, I wish none of this had happened. But that's not possible. I'd like to magically be okay with it, but that's not happening either. I'm deeply hurt, and I think the best thing is to start the divorce. Diane warned me about trust issues moving forward, suggesting I hire an investigator to verify Linda's promises. She gave me a card and mentioned it could cost a few $1,000s, but it might help rebuild trust or reveal the truth. I was hesitant but understood the cold logic. Before leaving, Diane assured me, "I'll handle the legal side. You focus on your life." Later that day, I met Ron Jackson, a middle-aged, unremarkable man who sold surveillance equipment. I spent nearly $3,800 on tools to monitor Linda's calls, texts, and activities. He helped me set up an app on her phone that would record everything discreetly. I didn't feel like returning to work, so I headed home early. Linda was starting dinner looking tense. I greeted her, but there was no hug or kiss. She knew our upcoming conversation would be tough. I spent time with the kids, enjoying their excitement while Linda stewed in her own thoughts. That morning, I had secretly installed the surveillance app on her phone. It took less than 10 minutes, and she hadn't changed her password, which made it easy. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, we sat on the sofa with a glass of wine. "How was your day?" she asked. "Typical Monday," I replied, "tired." "I'm sorry," she said softly. Mine wasn't too bad. It was nice to think about something other than everything. I couldn't hide the sharpness in my voice. I wish I could say the same. Linda flinched, then added, "Dee called this afternoon. What did she want?" "She's not as bad as you think. She asked about you first before Dante. She said she's sorry for your pain, but she's sure it'll get better and be just a bump in the road. That shows how much she knows," I said coldly. We sat in silence for a while, looking and acting like we always did, just another night at home. But something had shifted. There was a distance between us that hadn't been there before, and I could tell Linda felt it too. "Do you have any questions about what I wrote?" Linda asked. I shook my head, unsure where to begin. "I was looking for something in your letter, but it wasn't there." Her body tensed. "What's that?" "Any sign that you understand what I have to get past if we're going to stay together," she shuddered. "Do you want to talk about that now, or are you too tired?" "You need to know, but it doesn't have to be tonight. The sooner we talk, The sooner you can start healing. All right, I said, gathering my thoughts. Let's imagine this was our first date, and you left with another man, spent the night with him, and came back the next morning. If that happened, would there have been a second date? But Jim, it was Dante. Why does that matter? You still chose him over me. If it were our first date, I'd never call you again. But after almost 10 years of marriage, how am I supposed to move past it? Jim, I didn't choose him over you. The hell you didn't? For the rest of my life, I'll have to know I'm only your first choice when a better option isn't available. Linda looked horrified. No, Jim. You've always been my first choice. One night doesn't change that. One night did change it. You chose him from the moment he asked you to dance until he was done with you. How can I convince you that's not true? You can't, because it is. You made choices every step of the way, signaling D, telling her to cover for you, walking toward him. You chose him over me every time. Linda was quiet, then almost whispered, maybe I just don't want it to be true. I don't want to believe I'm the kind of person who could do that, even though my friends think it's okay. But that's not what's in my heart. A week ago, we knew everything about each other's hearts. Now I don't even know what to believe. She sighed. I know I hurt you, but wounds heal over time, don't they? This doesn't have to affect our whole future. You're right. It'll hurt less eventually, but this changed everything. You broke the trust I had in you and in our marriage. Things I thought would always be private between us are gone. What's left to count on? She couldn't answer, just sighed. I haven't changed, Jim. I'm still just me. I know, and I haven't changed either. But what you did Friday night changed us. Linda was quiet for a long time. I know this is hard, and I know I've hurt you deeply, but you always find a way through difficult things. You'll find a way through this too. I sighed. What if the man you married died that night or the next morning? She stood tall, eyes full of sadness and determination. If he did, I'd know because I'd have died too. But I don't believe it. Not for a moment. I grabbed my coat and headed to the door. Maybe you're right, but I'm still struggling tonight. I'm going back to my hotel. As I left, it hit me how unfair this was. She had made the choice, had the night she wanted, and all our friends thought it was fine. Meanwhile, my life was a wreck, and somehow I was the one left to find a way forward. Later that night, I got a call from Derek. Hey man, did you know the Sentinel ran your story? Romano and your wife are getting dragged through the mud. I hadn't thought about it since talking to the reporter, so I stopped by a store and grabbed the paper. Sure enough, there was a story complete with pictures of Romano's shattered Corvette window. The article dove into his career, endorsements, and his contract negotiations. And while it wasn't written as fact, it was clear they were pushing the scandal. For the next couple of hours, I kept getting phone calls from friends about the newspaper article. Eventually, I stopped answering and let them go to voicemail. When I got back to my hotel and checked the messages, one stood out. It was from Doug Coffey, the host of Coffee in the Morning, a local sports talk radio show. Jim, he said, I saw the article and wanted to know if you'd call into our show tomorrow morning. Our peak audience is between 7:30 and 8:30. If you can call at 7 o'clock, we'll see about getting you on air. He gave the producer's name and number. A little before 11 o'clock, I got a notification I hadn't seen before. When I checked, it was a message through the app I'd installed on Linda's phone. Dear Linda, the message read, I was sorry not to see you at Morrison's last night. I hope you aren't ill. I remember dancing with you, and everything that followed, very fondly. I'd like to get together again soon. I'll call you. Dante. The asshole had texted my wife. This meant she gave him her number. What happened to, it's over, one and done? Why would she give him her number if she didn't plan to stay in touch? I anxiously waited to see if she'd respond, but thankfully she didn't. Exhausted, I finally fell asleep, but my dreams were filled with torment. During the day I could distract myself, but at night I was defenseless. I relived everything that happened at Morrison's, imagining Linda's time with Dante in vivid detail, thanks to her letter. I saw her give herself to him willingly, and in ways she'd never done with me. She'd said it was the best sex she'd ever had, and that's what haunted my dreams night after night. I woke up sweating, sometimes crying, only to fall back asleep and continue the nightmare. Linda wasn't helping either. While she felt bad for hurting me and damaging our marriage, it wasn't. It was obvious that she did not have any regrets about being with Dante, and thanks to his texts, I suspected it wasn't over. How could I trust her after that? That night at the club, I had thought our marriage was stronger than ever, but Linda had let Dante sweep her off her feet without a second thought for me. Even when I stood at his doorstep, she still turned me away. She shut the door on me, on our love, on our marriage. These thoughts plagued me until Tuesday morning when I woke up before dawn, grateful to escape my nightmares. I remembered that I had to call the radio show, so I got dressed and prepared to tell my story. As usual, I listened to Coffee in the Morning on my phone while I shaved and showered. The discussion focused on the team's performance, with some criticism of Dante's play, but nothing too harsh. At 7 a.m., I called in. The producer reminded me to stick to the facts and avoid getting too emotional, then put me on hold. When Dan Coffey finally brought me on, I felt my nerves rise. "So, let's bring in Jim Lewis," Dan said. "Jim, you're not a sports analyst, right?" "No, just a fan like everyone else," I replied. "But you saw Dante on Friday night, and you've got some insight into what went down over the weekend, correct?" "Yes, you could say that. Dante and I had some words, and that might have affected his game on Sunday." I walked the audience through the events at Morrison's, including my arrest. Dan kept me on track, and by the end of my 10-minute recount, my story was out. Callers flooded the lines, some tearing into Dante for letting his personal life affect his performance, while a few diehard fans tried to defend him, but were quickly drowned out. Dan kept me on for another 40 minutes, as callers continued to vent their anger at Dante. Toward the end of the show, Dan revealed that the team's vice president of public affairs and Dante's agent had requested to come on the show the next day to set the record straight. Dan asked if I'd be willing to call in afterward to respond. It was clear that Dan saw this as a win-win situation for him. Either the team cleared Dante's name, or my story would dominate. Either way, he'd get great radio. After the show, Art, the producer, called again. Now treating me like an old friend, he was floored when I told him I had recorded the whole incident at Dante's house. He asked if I could send the recording so they could use it on the air. I agreed, but my phone was blowing up with more messages from Linda's phone. It was hard to believe how much time she spent texting. Reviewing all her conversations felt overwhelming, so I decided to wait until lunchtime to tackle it. But before I could get back to work, I heard the familiar chirp again. I checked, and it was another message from Dante. "Hi, Linda, it's Dante. I'd really like to see you again. Is this a good number to call? Let's set something up." 20 minutes later, another message. "Hi, Linda. Dante again. I really feel we have something special. I loved what we did, and I'd like to do it again and more." I felt my heart racing. Unlike before, I didn't feel relieved that she hadn't responded. Instead, I felt like I was under attack. I was trying to get control of myself when my assistant knocked on my door, saying my boss wanted to see me. Since I had spent so much time at the radio station, I arrived at work over an hour late, expecting the worst. I peeked into my boss's office, bracing for a stern look, but instead, I was greeted with a smirk. "Come in, Jim. Sit down." "I want to talk to you," he said, motioning to a chair. I sat, preparing for the conversation. "I heard you on Sportsport this morning while driving to work." "Hell, half the company heard you," he chuckled. "I just want to say I'm sorry about what's happened. You should have told me what was going on Monday." "Well, Paul," I replied, "I was still in shock. And honestly, it's humiliating when your wife does something like that with a celebrity. I'm not sure I've even processed it yet." He nodded in understanding. "I know you'll keep up the great work, but if you need time off, let me know. I'll cover for you." I was relieved by his supportive tone, especially since he didn't mention the radio interview as a potential issue for the company. I thanked him and headed back to my office, noticing the way my coworkers looked at me. Everyone knew. The rest of the day, the atmosphere felt lighter. Women in the office smiled at me more warmly, and the guys would give sympathetic comments whenever I went for coffee. The sympathy was nice, but it was strange being the center of attention while knowing how broken my personal life was. Before Friday, my life had been steady, no major highs or lows. I didn't seek out excitement, and maybe that's why Linda felt free to tear it apart, knowing I'd worked to put it back together. But now I realized that my normal life had been an illusion, and there was no going back. As lunchtime rolled around, I steeled myself to sift through Linda's communications. I started with her texts, quickly realizing how much women gossip. Most of her work texts were trivial, filled with small talk about coworkers and their outfits. I decided to save those for a late-night read with a beer. The texts with her friends were a bit more substantial, but for real insight, I turned to the phone calls. The first voicemail was from Jane, one of the couples we were with at Morrison's. It was brief, just asking Linda to call her back. I suspected Jane had been more involved than I knew. Then, just as I was about to delete Jane's call, I got another chirp from Linda's phone. She had texted Dante. "Hi, Dante. Thanks for the text. I'm in a meeting, but I'll talk to you later. I'm in a meeting with my boss right now, but can I call you in 30 minutes? I was worried you'd ignore my call." Whenever he replied, "Great. Talk to you soon," she sent back, "I love you." I held my breath reading their exchange, hoping it was nothing. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it certainly wasn't good. Was she just going to tell him to stop contacting her? I would find out soon enough. I decided to take a quick break, visiting the restroom, copier, and grabbing some coffee. When I returned to my desk, I began deleting more of Linda's mundane calls from vendors and coworkers. Then, one call stood out. "Hello, Dante. Is that you?" Linda's voice was soft and eager. "Of course, Linda." "I miss you, babe," Dante replied. "I miss you too. I can't get you out of my mind, but we need to be careful. Jim can't find out I'm talking to you. Don't worry. It's not you he's after. It's me. He's making a big deal of this. He even went to the newspaper and did a radio show this morning trying to make me look bad. No, Jim wouldn't do that. He was just here last night having dinner with us. He didn't say anything about it. Well, he did, and people are getting upset. You need to talk to him and get him to back off before he digs himself into a hole." "I'll talk to him, Dante. But this isn't going the way I thought it would. I figured Jim would be mad for a bit, and then we'd get back to normal. But this time feels different. I don't know why you're making this so hard. We had something special, didn't we? You said I made you feel things no one else did, not even him. Yes, but Jim is a good husband and a great father. I feel safe with him. With you, it's exciting, but you've said you've never been faithful. How can I give up Jim for you if I can't trust that you'll stay? But isn't it worth the risk? I can't risk my kids' future. I love you, but I need stability for them. Just give me more time, Linda. We'll figure it out. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I need to deal with Jim tonight." "Okay, babe. Love you." "Me too," she said softly. Hearing those words drained all hope from me. I sat staring at my computer, realizing Diane had been right. Trust, but verify. But now, with my worst fears confirmed, I didn't know what to do. The rest of the day was an emotional roller coaster, sympathy from coworkers mixed with the crushing knowledge of Linda's continued connection with Dante. By the end of the workday, my assistant Karen came in with a concerned look. "Hey, boss. You've seemed off today. Anything I can do to help?" she asked gently. I gave her a polite response, thanking her, but insisting I would work through it. She nodded, unconvinced, but mollified. Later, when I arrived home for dinner, the atmosphere was off. The kids were in the family room watching Frozen again, while Linda hovered over the stove. "Smells good," I said, trying to sound normal. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes. "The kids would love to spend some time with you," she replied coldly, clearly avoiding me. Dinner was strange. The kids were chatty, but Linda was quiet, barely looking at me. Every attempt to engage her was met with short, clipped replies. She was angry but trying to keep it from coming out in front of the kids. After dinner, I offered to wash the dishes, but Linda told me to help get the kids ready for bed instead. Once Tommy was asleep, and Emma was reading in her room, Linda sat down at the kitchen table with her arms crossed. It was clear she wanted to talk. "I can't believe you did that," she said angrily. "How could you be so callous and not consider my feelings?" "What exactly are you referring to?" I asked, though I had a feeling she meant the newspaper article or the radio interview. "I know you're mad at me, but to say such mean things about Dante publicly, you're messing with his career. What about our friends, my parents, and my co-workers? What do they think of me now?" Her voice grew louder with each sentence. "If Dante was worried about his career, maybe he shouldn't have messed around with married women," I replied calmly. "And as for what people think of you, they see you for what you are. A free hooker. I gave you the chance to handle this privately, but you chose to stay with Dante. Life is the sum of our choices, and with actions come consequences. Even someone as arrogant as Dante should know that." "Dante is furious with you, Jim," she snapped. "You have no idea what he's capable of. He's rich, influential, and well-connected. You don't even know the kinds of people he's friends with." "So, when did you talk to him?" I asked, staying calm but firm. Her anger briefly flickered into guilt before returning. "He called me at work." "How did he know where you work?" "He didn't. He called my cell phone," she admitted quietly. "And how did he get your number?" "I gave it to him," she whispered. "When did you give it to him?" "When he brought me home Saturday morning," she said, almost pleading. "And why would you give him your number if you weren't planning to see him again, as you claimed?" "I wasn't thinking when he asked," she stammered. "Well, the next time you talk to him, let him know it's only going to get worse from here." I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "As for your other problems, we'll deal with them as they come. I need to go home now." "I've got a busy day tomorrow," I said, heading for the door. "But this is your home, Jim," Linda said hesitantly. "I'm not so sure, Linda. We'll see." I grabbed my backpack and left. My visit to Ron was looking smarter by the minute. My laptop had been downloading the recordings from the phones and cameras during After grabbing a few hours of uneasy sleep filled with unsettling dreams, I awoke at 4:30 a.m. on Wednesday. Anxiety gnawed at me, prohibiting any further slumber. I showered and dressed, making my way to the radio station by 6:30 a.m. Upon my arrival, Art briefed me on the setup. Romano's representatives and public relations personnel would be in the main studio with Dan, while I would observe from an adjacent one behind a one-way window. At 6:55 a.m., I received a text from Linda. "Jim, I know where you are and what you're doing. Please don't do this. Think of me. Think of our family. Let this go." Comprehending that Dante had alerted her, I shook my head and silenced my phone. Dan initiated the broadcast at 7 o'clock a.m., introducing the day's topic. He presented headlines, advertisements, and an introduction. Yesterday, we delved into the story of Jim Lewis, an ordinary man whose wife was stolen by superstar Dante Romano, leaving him humiliated and alone. However, our guests today dispute this narrative, claiming it's merely the ramblings of a disgruntled individual in the throes of an acrimonious divorce. I muttered in frustration, wondering if I had been lured into a trap. Art reassured me with a gesture, so I settled in to witness the unfolding interview. Romano's team proceeded to spin a tale that exonerated him. They claimed that Dante was unaware of Linda's marital status and had only escorted her home to ensure her safety. Furthermore, they depicted me as an overzealous aggressor who had vandalized his vehicle in a rage. As the hour drew close, Dan alluded to my forthcoming segment, prompting the men to cast irritated glances in my direction. Art escorted them out, and the crew prepared me for my part in the broadcast. Ray, one of the producers, informed me that they had compiled clips from our recordings and Romano's team's statements. Dan would pose questions to me, and Ray would handle the audio. Ray imparted his belief that I had been wronged and expressed his determination to ensure that justice prevailed. Dan's introduction concluded, and we went live. The program proceeded seamlessly. Dan interplayed clips from Romano's team with my recordings, which contradicted their assertions. When they denied Dante's knowledge of Linda's marriage, we presented an audio clip of him discussing her. I countered their claim that she was not at his residence by recounting the actual events, supported by further audio evidence. It was a meticulous takedown of their fabrications. Upon returning home that evening, I volunteered to wash the dishes. However, Linda requested my assistance with the children's bedtime routine. After putting Tommy to bed and tucking Emma into bed with a book, Linda confronted me at the kitchen table, her arms crossed. "I cannot fathom what you have done," she uttered, her voice thick with ire. "How could you act so recklessly, disregarding my sentiments?" Sensing her distress stemmed from the newspaper article or the radio interview, I responded calmly, "I am perplexed. What has sparked your anger? You must realize that you have humiliated Dante publicly, potentially jeopardizing his profession. Moreover, what of our friends, my family, and my colleagues? How will they perceive me now?" Her voice escalated with each sentence. "If Dante's career concerns you, perhaps he should have considered the consequences of engaging with a married woman. As for how others perceive you, they will recognize you for who you truly are," I countered. "You are an inexpensive—" I apologize. "A complimentary companion. I provided an opportunity for you to resolve this privately, but you chose Dante. Our choices have repercussions, and even someone with Dante's arrogance should be cognizant of that." Linda's expression softened briefly, replaced by guilt, before regaining its anger. "Dante is enraged with you, Jim. You have no comprehension of what he is capable of. He is wealthy, influential, and well-connected. You're tampering with formidable individuals beyond your understanding." "When did you have this conversation with Dante, Linda?" I inquired, maintaining a calm demeanor. Her expression shifted. "He called me at work." "How did he acquire your work number?" I persisted. "I provided it to him," she uttered barely above a whisper. "And why would you offer him your contact information when you pledged to never see him again?" I questioned sharply. After a pause, she replied, "I wasn't thinking clearly when he asked." I rose from my chair and collected my jacket. "Should he contact you again, inform him that this is merely the beginning. As for your remaining concerns, we shall address them as they arise. I must return home now. Tomorrow promises to be a challenging day." "But this is your home, Jim," Linda interjected, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We shall explore that possibility further, Linda," I responded. "Until then, adieu." I left the house and departed for my residence. As I made my way, I contemplated my recent visit to Ron. Its wisdom was becoming increasingly evident. My laptop had been downloading the recordings while we conversed. I had intended to review them later, but circumstances dictated otherwise. By the time I reached my hotel room, the hour was well past midnight. I managed only a few restless hours of sleep, haunted by nightmares of public humiliation. Dan initiated the broadcast by introducing the guests and summarizing my account from the preceding day. Subsequently, he ceded the floor to Romano's team, who proceeded to weave a tale of misconceptions. According to their narrative, Dante was unaware of Linda's marital status and had merely escorted her home to ensure her safety. Moreover, they portrayed me as an overzealous individual who had vandalized his vehicle in a fit of rage. As the hour drew close, Dan previewed my segment, prompting the two men to cast incensed glances in my direction. Art escorted them out, and I prepared for my time on air. Ray, one of the technicians, elucidated their plan to extract audio clips from both parties' recordings, thereby exposing the truth. "I toiled throughout the night on this project because I firmly believe you were unjustly treated. I am committed to preventing a recurrence of such an incident," Ray declared. Dan's introduction concluded, and we commenced broadcasting live. Over the ensuing half hour, Dan alternated between playing clips from Romano's team and my recordings, which unequivocally contradicted their assertions. With each clip, I provided context, demonstrating their fabrications. The execution was flawless, and by the conclusion, it was evident to the audience who was being truthful. Undoubtedly, the broadcast was mortifying, but I had effectively exposed Romano and his associates as liars. The subsequent listener calls were overwhelmingly supportive, although many expressed dismay at the agent's deception. Sports enthusiasts value honesty and despise being manipulated. Upon the show's conclusion, the studio crew erupted in applause and offered their congratulations. Even Dan extended an invitation for me to return as a guest commentator. As Art escorted me out, he cautioned, "Proceed with caution. The world of professional sports is rife with affluent and influential individuals like Romano. Maintain your vigilance and steer clear of unnecessary confrontations." I expressed my gratitude and departed, imbued with a sense of triumph. Back at the office, the mood was celebratory. Everyone had tuned in to the radio broadcast. However, reality struck when I discovered numerous messages from Linda on my desk and phone, all variations on the same theme. "How could you inflict this upon me, our children? And Dante?" I experienced a twinge of guilt until it became apparent that her primary concern was for Dante. At that juncture, Derek telephoned. "Jim, you have a court appearance scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. regarding the vandalism charge against Romano's vehicle." "Yes, Derek, I recall," I responded. "What can I anticipate?" "Primarily, entering your plea and establishing a trial date. However, given that you confessed to the offense during your emergency call, the district attorney may seek a harsher penalty due to the involvement of a celebrity." "What if I plead guilty and provide an explanation of the circumstances?" "That may prove effective. I will confer with the district attorney and secure the presence of the arresting officers for corroboration. Let's meet at 8 a.m. on Monday." After hanging up, I utilized my lunch break to review the recordings from my residence. Most of the content was mundane, but one particular call between Linda and Dante caught my attention. Dante urged Linda to exert more pressure on me, suggesting that she remind me that the divorce would leave me destitute. Linda expressed reluctance, stating that she was uncertain if she could resort to such tactics. Dante encouraged her to adopt a more forceful approach, but Linda appeared torn between Dante and myself. The remainder of my day was a blur, the exhilaration of the radio broadcast juxtaposed against the disquietude caused by Linda's divided loyalties. By day's end, Corey invited me to join him and some colleagues for drinks. I initially declined, citing a dinner engagement with Linda and the children. However, when I texted her to inform her, she responded almost immediately. "I don't believe tonight is an appropriate time. Let's discuss this tomorrow." It was evident that Linda still harbored feelings for Dante. Suddenly, my phone chirped with a text from Linda intended for Dante. 10 o'clock. I contemplated its significance, unsure of how to interpret it. As Corey passed by once more, I exclaimed, "Hey, Corey, is that invitation still open?" He beamed. "Of course, we're heading to All-Star. See you there." All-Star was a quintessential sports bar, a sprawling rectangular bar, high-top tables in the center, lower tables along the periphery, and booths lining the walls. Flat-screen TVs adorned every surface, particularly around the bar. Upon entering, I spotted Corey waving from a high-top table, accompanied by Matthew, Sarah, and Jacob, all work acquaintances. Corey and Matthew were single. Jacob was recently married, and Sarah, like myself, was married with 2 children. When I took my seat, an unusual silence fell over the group, as if they were awaiting me to establish the evening's tone. I offered a smile, and Corey promptly broke the tension with a hearty laugh, which prompted everyone else to relax and join in. "Damn, Jim," chuckled Corey. "We haven't experienced this level of excitement at work in ages." After ordering a beverage, the group delved into my story, having listened to the latter portion of my radio interview. I maintained a lighthearted tone, focusing on the more humorous aspects, which elicited laughter, particularly the "sucks to be you" comment. The bar gradually filled with patrons, and the drinks continued to flow, bolstering my confidence that attending had been a wise decision. I was about to order another drink when I glanced up and encountered the most captivating blue eyes I had ever beheld. "Hello," she said. "I'm Ashley. Are you Jim Lewis?" I had never laid eyes on her before and was taken aback by her familiarity with my name. "Yes, but have we met?" I inquired, perplexed. "No, but you've changed my life," she responded, her words striking me with unexpected force. She swiftly explained that until 2 days prior, she had been engaged to Dante Romano. However, my story had precipitated a dramatic shift. Despite her cheerful demeanor, I could discern the pain in her eyes. Ashley invited us to join her and her friends at a larger table by the entrance. Corey and Matthew were evidently eager to make the move, but the decision rested with me. I acquiesced, and we relocated to the new table, where we were introduced to Ashley's friends, Jessica, Alexis, and Nicole, all cheerleaders. Conversation commenced briskly, yet the weighty topic of Dante and Linda remained conspicuously absent. Subsequently, the young women's attention shifted to the front entrance, where a captivating woman had just entered. Petite and blessed with Mediterranean features, she possessed dark hair that framed her face like a lion's mane. I instinctively rose to my feet as she approached. "Everyone, this is Ellen, our assistant coach," Ashley announced before turning to me and Ellen. "And this is Jim Lewis." Ellen's beauty was breathtaking, almost artistic. As we shook hands, I detected a glimmer of excitement and sadness in her eyes. After we were seated, I inquired about their familiarity with me, to which Ellen replied that my story had reverberated throughout their team. "Most athletes are accustomed to obtaining whatever they desire, and Dante is no exception," Ellen explained. "He's a star, and the team has perpetually turned a blind eye to his behavior, even when he began dating Ashley, which violated regulations. However, you confronted him in an unprecedented manner, and now the entire team is facing the consequences." Ellen disclosed that management had convened a meeting that day to address the adverse publicity surrounding Dante, specifically citing my name. They had implemented a zero-tolerance policy for player misconduct, and Dante had become an outcast in the locker room. Her words were revelatory. I had been so preoccupied with my own tribulations that I had failed to recognize the wider impact of my actions. As the evening progressed, it became evident that Ashley had ended her relationship with Dante upon learning of his affair with Linda. She did not appear devastated, but rather upset that the matter had become public knowledge. Corey endeavored to fill the void left by Dante, and Ashley seemed to relish the attention. By evening's end, the group had dwindled to Ashley, Corey, Ellen, and myself. Ellen and I spent the majority of the night engaged in one-on-one conversation. Although she hesitated to share much about herself, she appeared genuinely interested in my situation. However, she skillfully steered the discussion away from her personal life, possibly out of respect for her role as a mentor to the cheerleaders. Noting the late hour, and sensing that Ashley and Corey were in no hurry to depart, Ellen turned to me and said softly, "Jim, I don't wish to intrude, but I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in a long while. I believe there is more we need to discuss, but it doesn't seem like we'll have the opportunity tonight. Would you be interested in meeting again?" I smiled. "I feel the same way, Ellen. There's so much I don't understand, and we haven't talked much about you yet. I'd love to meet again soon." Her face lit up. "How about lunch tomorrow?" "That sounds great. Where would you like to go? Should I pick you up?" Ellen smiled. "No, I'll meet you." "How about the Madison? It's quiet, and I've heard the food is good. Is that okay?" I was taken aback. The Madison was the establishment where our evening had commenced the night everything fell apart. It wasn't a place I wished to revisit. However, upon witnessing Ellen's enthusiasm, I assented. 12:30 at the Madison sounds good. I'll make the reservation." "Wonderful," Ellen replied, bidding me good night. It was slightly past 10 o'clock p.m. when I left the bar and drove back to my hotel. Although my conversation with Ellen had distracted me, my thoughts kept returning to Linda's enigmatic text. 10 o'clock. When nothing transpired by 10 o'clock p.m., I grew suspicious and decided to drive by the house. The street was quiet, and the house appeared normal, save for a light in the living room. I assumed the children were asleep. I didn't consider myself a stalker, but curiosity got the better of me. I parked down the street and crept around to the back of the house, peering into the dark kitchen and family room. Finally, I approached the porch and looked into the living room window. There was Linda, seated on the love seat with a glass of wine, calmly conversing with someone out of view. I figured I should leave before being caught, but then I noticed a shadow moving on the wall. I leaned in for a closer look, and my blood ran cold. It was Dante Romano, sitting in my living room, holding a glass of wine. Anger and bewilderment consumed me. How could this be happening? I hadn't received any alerts from the phone tap, so she must have called him from work. What could I do now? If I barged in, it would be obvious that I had been spying. Just then a neighbor's gate creaked open, followed by the sound of a trash can rolling down the driveway, triggering several dogs to start barking. Feeling exposed, I hastily retreated to my car. Crap, crap, crap. That was all I could think. What the hell was going on? I reassured myself that everything would be recorded and that I'd know the full story tomorrow. I barely slept that night, the image of Linda and Dante together replaying in my head. Thoughts of Ellen also lingered. There was something about her that felt like she was holding back. The following morning, I awoke early, groggy, and frustrated. As I prepared for the day, I listened to the local sports radio station, where rumors of a postseason trade involving Dante Romano were being discussed. I wondered how Linda would react to this development, especially after what I had witnessed the night before. I texted Linda to confirm that she had left for work. "Good morning, Linda. I hope you slept well. I miss seeing you and the kids. How about dinner tomorrow night?" Her reply was cold. "What's the matter? No more crap to sling on the radio today?" I responded, "Nope. Tell the a-hole he's safe today. Childish? Yes." Unable to resist, I returned home. Inside, everything appeared normal, save for the breakfast dishes in the sink. I set up my laptop to download the surveillance files, retrieve the financial documents from my lawyer, and check the children's rooms. Tommy's room was its usual disarray, and I smiled upon catching a faint whiff of his shampoo from his pillow. Emma's room was immaculate, and I noticed a new photo of the two of us at her Halloween party, framed in a heart shape. This brought tears to my eyes. In the master bedroom, I discovered my personal belongings stashed away, replaced by Linda's. My clothes had been relegated to the back of the closet, substituted by unfamiliar outfits. It was an unsettling sight, but I couldn't make sense of it yet. Returning to the kitchen, I found that the files had finished downloading. I packed everything up and headed to my lawyer's office. Diane had matters well in hand. She provided me with a list of court-approved counselors and instructed me to select 3. Later, back at the office, I received a call from Dee. I immediately hung up. She was the last person I wanted to speak to. Moments later, my friend Dave called, attempting to defend her. However, I was not having it. "She's no friend of mine," I snapped. After a brief hesitation, I decided to go for it. After Linda left the club with that idiot on Friday, Dee told me something shocking. She said if Dante had chosen her instead of Linda, she would have gone with him and done the same thing Linda did to me. Dave stammered, clearly uncomfortable, but I could tell that he believed me. Nevertheless, he persisted. "Jim, don't you understand? You and Linda are the best of us. We look up to both of you. Why do you think you're always the designated driver? It's not just about you staying sober. It's because we trust you to do the right thing. If you two can't make it, what hope is there for the rest of us?" "Dave, if we're the best of you, then there's not much hope for your marriage," I retorted. We exchanged a few more words before saying goodbye, neither of us having changed the other's mind. I realized that Dave needed Dee in his life, just as I needed her out of mine. After hanging up, I locked my office door and reviewed the video files from my house the night before. Just as Ellen's text, confirming our lunch arrived, I watched Linda getting the children ready for bed. She then spent an hour getting dolled up, as if preparing for a date. Not a good sign, I muttered. Just before 10 o'clock p.m., Linda, now dressed to impress, answered a call. A man's voice said, "I'm 5 out," before hanging up. Moments later, she admitted Dante Romano into the house. They shared some wine in the kitchen, and then moved to the living room, where Linda sat on the love seat, maintaining some distance from him. At least they weren't kissing. But then their conversation took a disturbing turn. Romano complained about how I had been talking to the press and the radio, making him look bad. He was worried about losing endorsement deals due to morality clauses, and pressured Linda to get me to stop before things escalated further. I was interrupted by a knock at my office door. Karen rushed in with a client issue, and I had to shift focus. By noon, we had made enough progress for me to head to lunch. When I returned to my office to retrieve my coat, Karen appeared concerned. "Sorry for barging in earlier, boss. You seemed off. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, you just caught me by surprise. I've got a lunch appointment, but I'll check in when I'm back." At the Madison, I spotted Ellen right away. She looked stunning, even more so than I remembered. As we settled in, our conversation flowed effortlessly. She opened up about her difficult childhood her parents' love story, and the tragedy that struck when her father died in a car accident. Her stepfather was abusive, and her mother fell into a deep depression. Ellen's story was heartbreaking, yet she spoke with a quiet strength. Just as we were bonding, my heart sank as I saw Linda storming toward our table, her face contorted with anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded. "Who is this woman?" I tried to remain calm. "Lower your voice, Linda. She wasn't having it. You're having an affair." "This isn't an affair. It's lunch," I said, raising my voice so others could hear. "An affair is when a wife sleeps with someone who isn't her husband. You should know." Linda looked shocked, embarrassed by the onlookers. I asked Ellen to give us a moment and escorted Linda outside, where I noticed Dee sitting with friends. So, Dee had been the one to tip her off. "Everyone in that restaurant now knows what you did, and they probably think you're crazy on top of it," I said. "Go back to your office or wherever." Linda demanded to know who Ellen was, still suspicious. "Her name is Ellen, and you introduced us," I said. She didn't believe me. "Well, if you hadn't spent the weekend with Dante, she wouldn't be sitting with me today. But Dee said she saw you holding her hand." Linda pressed on. She shared something painful with me, and I was consoling her. "That's what decent people do," I explained. "You've always said married people shouldn't meet others alone without telling their spouse." She countered, and she was right. I had said that before. "It's not as if you haven't done worse recently." "Linda, can't you understand that was different?" "I'm not talking about Friday," I said. Her face went pale. "What did you do last night?" "Nothing, I was with the kids." "Really?" "I stopped by the house last night." Linda looked panicked. "Why didn't you come in?" "Because you weren't alone." Her face drained of color. "What did you see?" "Enough to know you're lying. We needed to talk, but not here." She agreed to come by after work. Without another word, I walked back into the restaurant, passing Dee's table. I stopped, stared at her, and said, "You're a vile person, Dee. I want you out of my life completely. If I see or hear from you again, I'll be forced to do something you won't like. Got it, witch?" Dee looked shocked, and I slammed my fist on the table. "Nod your head, Dee. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly, and I walked back to Ellen, who sat quietly looking out the window. "That must have been awful," she said softly, turning to me with kindness in her eyes. "But you handled it well." It amazed me how she thought of me first, despite being publicly insulted. It was empathy, something Linda had been missing throughout this whole mess. Ellen and I tried to pick up our conversation, but my mind kept drifting back, searching for any moment when Linda had shown true empathy during tough times. Linda was kind and confident, but empathy had never been her strength, especially lately. We finished lunch, but the mood had shifted. We thanked each other for a nice meal and agreed to stay in touch, though no plans were made. We parted with a simple kiss on the cheek, and as I left, I thought maybe some time and space was exactly what we needed. When I returned to the office, my team greeted me with enthusiasm, happy with our recent project's success, but I needed space. I closed my office door and began reviewing the recordings from the night before. The day blurred by, and I vaguely recall Karen saying goodnight. By the time I left, it was after 6 p.m., and as much as I dreaded it, I knew I needed to see the kids at the house. It was quiet except for something baking in the oven, and a letter from Linda on my plate. In the letter, she apologized for everything with Dante, expressed regret, and asked for a chance to rebuild our marriage. A week ago, I would have cherished that letter. Even 24 hours ago, I might have considered it. But after seeing the recordings, it didn't mean as much. I folded it, put it in my coat, grabbed a beer, and waited for them to come home. The evening with the kids was perfect, playing, wrestling, and laughing. But after dinner, Linda poured us drinks, clearly ready to talk. I wasn't. I told her I was too tired and would talk tomorrow. As I left, she asked, "Don't I even rate a kiss?" I paused, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and walked out. Back at the hotel as I was getting ready for bed, I heard the familiar chirp of my phone. It was a text from Dee. "Linda, so how did he take it?" "I don't know," Linda replied. "He didn't stay long, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him." "Heck, such a crap," Dee wrote, ignoring my earlier warning. "He'll never find someone as amazing as you." "I don't know, Dee," Linda responded. "He seemed distant, like someone had died." I'm not sure where his head is. Don't worry, you're not stuck in a convent, Dee replied cryptically. After some more gossip, the text ended. It was clear that Linda had shared details of her time with Dante, but was holding back the worst parts, even from Dee. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I got another notification. It was a recording of Linda's call to Dante. I hit play and listened. Linda flirted, and Dante reassured her, even promising to wear his football towel a certain way during the game as a signal to her. He complained that I was making things difficult, and Linda admitted she hadn't talked to me about stopping. Dante pushed her to take the next step with him, emphasizing that he could give her a better life than I ever could. Linda admitted that their night together was the best sex of her life, and that she couldn't deny the attraction. But she still saw me as the father of our children. The call ended with both of them professing their love. I woke up early the next morning, unable to shake the events of the past week. It felt impossible that this story could have a happy ending, at least for me. Determined to take control, I decided to move back home, if only to be closer to my kids and not give Linda more time with Dante. I texted Linda to let her know I was moving back that evening. Her enthusiastic response came quickly. "That's great news, honey. The kids will be thrilled. We need to talk at the house." I set up my laptop to download the surveillance files. After listening to what Linda had said and written, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the same bed with her. I moved into Tommy's room, setting up an air mattress and organizing his toys. I cleared Linda's things from the bedroom and bathroom, moving her clothes to Emma's room and storing the extras in the garage. Linda wouldn't be happy with the changes, but I was sure she'd see it as temporary. I grabbed my laptop and headed to work, arriving only slightly late. Throughout the day, Linda texted in a good mood, eager to get back to normal, and asking if I wanted something special for dinner. When I walked into the house that evening, everything felt surreal. The kids were dressed up, watching TV, and Linda, dressed as if she were going out, was finishing dinner. The table was set with our best dishes. She didn't mention the new sleeping arrangements, but upstairs I noticed she had made changes. Our wedding photo was now by my side of the bed, and a glamour shot of her was facing me from the other side. Dinner was pleasant but subdued. Tommy was excited about his new room setup, while Emma wasn't happy about losing hers. I reassured them it wasn't permanent, and I noticed Linda smiling before Emma could even react. After dinner, Linda insisted on doing the dishes, which was unusual. I spent the evening with the kids, helping with their baths and reading them bedtime stories. When I returned to the living room, Linda was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and had a beer ready for me. "Jim, I know you're tired, but we need to talk," she said. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" I asked, avoiding eye contact. Frustrated, she replied, "I just want to discuss everything you've been doing with the newspaper and radio." It was clear that her priority was Dante. I stood up. "Nothing's planned for tonight, so it can wait. Good night." I went upstairs, leaving her stunned. That night, my phone chirped with messages, undoubtedly between Linda and Dante. But I didn't care. I slept better, knowing I had frustrated their plans. The next morning, I started yard work early. When Linda called me for breakfast, I told her I'd eat later, around 10 o'clock a.m. She came outside and asked if I could watch the kids while she went shopping. I agreed, happy to have more time with them. When she returned that afternoon with only a few bags, my suspicions grew. Later, after pretending to nap when she knocked for dinner, my phone continued to chirp with messages. I ignored them, enjoying the peace of shutting out Linda and Dante. The next morning, I decided to take the kids to the zoo. I left a note for Linda. "I thought you might be tired, so I'm taking the kids to the zoo. We'll be back by dinner. Have a great day." We spent the day enjoying the zoo, and I turned off my phone to avoid interruptions. When we returned home, the kids were asleep, and Linda was at the kitchen table. "Where have you been? Why was your phone off?" she demanded. "We were at the zoo." "I didn't want to be disturbed," I said calmly. Her scowl deepened, but she dropped the subject. I told her I'd be out for dinner with Derek that evening, and she angrily reminded me we were supposed to talk. I simply replied, "I spent the whole day with my family. I'm not ready to talk to you." I left the Sunday Sentinel on the counter. The front page read, "Romano is history. Local star traded to Salt Lake City." Linda glanced at it, showing no surprise. "That was unfair, Jim," she said coldly. "Dante didn't deserve that." I felt my blood pressure rise. "A lot of people are responsible for what happened, Linda, including someone in this kitchen." I left without further discussion, pretending I had plans with Derek. In reality, I wasn't meeting him. I just didn't want to deal with Linda and accidentally reveal what I knew from the surveillance footage. That evening, I scrolled through Linda's texts and listened to a furious Romano after learning he was traded. The thought of him wooing married women while being humiliated made me laugh a little. When I got home, the house was dark except for a light in Linda's room. After quietly entering the master bedroom, Linda knocked on the door. She sat on the bed in a revealing robe, looking sad. "Is there any chance for us, Jim?" she asked, desperate. "I don't know, Linda," I replied honestly. "If you'd come home with me instead of staying with Dante, maybe. But now I'm not sure." She broke down, pleading for forgiveness. "I never meant for this to happen. I love you, Jim. Please tell me we can fix this." I pulled away. "It's too late now. I'm not the same person anymore. I have a hearing tomorrow and need to sleep." When I asked if she planned to attend, Linda immediately said yes, determined to do whatever it took to repair things. I simply said good night, Linda, and closed the door. The next morning I woke up early, ready for the hearing. By 6 o'clock a.m. I was out the door, stopping for gas and glancing at a newspaper with another story about Romano's downfall. I met Derek at his office near the courthouse, and he reassured me about the day's proceedings. I listened, hoping his words would calm both of us. As we entered the courthouse lobby, the deputy sheriffs were screening everyone much more intensely than airport TSA. Since both criminal and civil cases were handled here, they likely preferred dealing with troublemakers at the door rather than inside a courtroom. After clearing security, we took the elevator to the third floor, stepping into a long hallway lined with windows on one side and dark panel walls with doors leading to various courtrooms on the other. Derek spotted a middle-aged woman in a suit and greeted her. "Bobby, I see you knocked me here this morning," she chuckled. "Thought I'd have an easy day, but you ruined that, didn't you?" Derek excused himself to speak with her, leaving me to text Linda, letting her know I had arrived. She replied that she was at the office and to let her know when the hearing was starting. While waiting, I looked up the citation I'd been charged with, Vehicle 30661. It was clear that I had violated the law by damaging Dante's car. The misdemeanor could carry up to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine. The jail time worried me more than the fine, and my anxiety rose. Just then Derek returned, but the woman, Roberta Malinoff, the assistant district attorney, was gone. "Good talk," was all he said. I told him what I had found in my brief research, but he brushed it off. "Jim, you're smart, but let me handle this." He led me into an empty courtroom, which looked just like the ones in movies. I took a seat in the first row behind the defendant's table, and Derek spread out his materials to claim our spot. Slowly, the room began to fill up. At 9 o'clock, the bailiff announced that all cell phones should be silenced. When the judge entered, everyone stood and then sat in unison. Derek whispered that my case was being pushed to the end of the docket. As expected, the next 2 hours dragged on as we waited for other cases to be handled, each one seemingly more serious than the last. I grew more nervous as the judge's patience wore thin. By 11:20 a.m., the courtroom had mostly emptied, and Bobby returned with an assistant. I noticed Janet Norton, the reporter, sitting quietly in the back, but Linda was still nowhere to be seen. The judge called my case, and the clerk read out the charges against me: malicious mischief to Dante Romano's vehicle. The judge asked both lawyers if they had spoken and believed the case could be resolved today. They both agreed, and the judge called them into his chambers. I sat alone, feeling the weight of the situation. A few minutes later, 2 police officers, likely the ones who arrested me, entered and sat down. Then, just as I was about to lose hope, Romano walked in, followed by Linda. She tried to make it seem like they weren't together, but her guilty expression said otherwise. Linda slid into the seat next to me, whispering, "Has it started?" I briefly explained what was happening and signaled for her to stay quiet. After about 15 more minutes, Derek and the prosecutor returned, and the judge re-entered the courtroom. Derek signaled me to stand beside him, as the judge asked if I was ready to enter a plea. Derek confirmed we were, and the judge addressed me. He acknowledged Derek's efforts on my behalf, but had a question about restitution. He asked to see the repair estimates Derek had presented. The judge explained that the damage to the car was minimal, with estimates ranging from $88 to $348. He noted that Derek had said I had offered $500 in restitution, which Romano declined. "Is that true, Mr. Lewis?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. Romano immediately stood up, shouting, "That's a lie. He never offered me anything." The judge turned to Linda and asked, "Is that true, Mrs. Lewis? Did your husband offer $500 to Mr. Romano as restitution?" Linda froze, clearly caught off guard by being dragged into the proceedings. She glanced at Romano, who signaled how she should respond. Then she looked at me, but I gave her nothing. Finally, she faced the judge and said, "No, Your Honor." Jim didn't offer Dante anything. The judge pressed her again, warning her of the consequences of perjury, but Linda stood firm. "I'm sure, Your Honor. I was there the whole time, and if he had, I would have seen it." It was clear that Romano still had a hold on her. The judge then asked the prosecutor if she had witnesses, and she called Officer Maria Johnson to the stand. Officer Johnson testified that I had asked her to note the $500 check I left under the windshield wiper of Romano's car. She further explained that she had photographed the check and later saw Romano tear it up in front of Linda. With that, the judge asked for my plea, and I responded, "Guilty, Your Honor." He decided to defer sentencing for a year, placing me on unsupervised probation. If I stayed out of trouble, the charge would be dismissed. Romano, furious, stood up and shouted, but the judge silenced him, making it clear that the restitution I offered was more than fair. The judge concluded by addressing Romano and Linda, accusing them of attempting to deceive the court, and sentencing them both to 3 days in jail for contempt. As the courtroom emptied, a man approached Romano and Linda, serving them legal papers. Romano's fall from grace was complete. His career soon ended, and Linda moved to California after our divorce, which was finalized within months. I got custody of the kids, and life slowly moved forward. I reconnected with Ellen after the divorce, of course, and after some time, we became serious. I proposed during a quiet moment by the lake, and to my surprise, she said yes. We married a few months later, and slowly but surely, Ellen became a beloved part of my family. The moment I truly knew we had become a real family was when my kids, Emma and Tommy, thanked us for a perfect day at an amusement park, calling Ellen Mom for the first time. Later that night, as we hugged and reflected on how far we had come, Ellen smiled up at me and asked, "Do you think it's too soon to start talking about having more kids?"